Anyway, things escalate from here as Mindy ends up getting pulled over, but she's got a foolproof way to get out of any ticket. She lies and she cries. So then she starts crying and she goes, I can't have a baby. So this is a messed up lie. Funny, but I can also understand why the cop would not want to have anything to do with this. So she's right in that she gets out of it. But I do want to say, I think if this was like the super cop type, and you know the person I'm talking about here, you know the cop that puffs out his chest and looks like he hasn't told a joke or heard a joke in his entire life, that type of cop is not letting you off with a warning. Welcome back to another episode of The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be ranking the next episode of the Mindy Project. Now, for those of you who are new to the show, I'm going to give you a brief agenda here. We start off with the potent notables, which are just a couple interesting facts or tidbits that I found out about the show or episode. Then I go into the episode overview, which is just me talking about everything that happened in the episode, so spoiler alert. And then I do the rank, where I rank the episode in 5 categories on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, all to find out what are the best sitcoms of all time. And today we're going to be ranking the 5th episode of the 3rd season of the Mindy Project, titled The Devil Wears Land's End, written by Jeremy Bronson and directed by Michael Spiller. All right, let's find out how this one stacked up, starting with the potent notables.
Potent notables.
So the 5th episode of the 3rd season of the Mindy Project aired October 14th, 2014. And as far as viewership numbers are concerned, it stayed the exact same from last week. Last week is 2.2 million viewers. This week, 2.2 million viewers. It was the second best show on the Fox lineup for Tuesday night. Now, as for my other potent notable, it's not much, but I thought it was kind of silly. When Danny's pretending to have a meltdown, he's holding and drinking straight from a wine bottle in his right hand. And from that bottle, he throws wine onto Mindy's face. However, when he does this, the wine he throws actually comes from a tumbler in his left hand, which he doesn't have before or after he throws the wine. But those are the potent notables, so let's go on to the episode overview. We open the episode with Danny and Mindy driving back from a wedding, and apparently it's the best type of wedding because the bride is older than Mindy. It's good that she's not vain at all. But then Danny is going to make this comment about how they shouldn't have brought a gift for a second wedding because it's just rewarding failure. And I'm like, isn't he already married? Like, if I was Mindy, I'd be like, well, if we ever get married someday, are you going to tell people not to bring gifts? Anyway, things escalate from here as Mindy ends up getting pulled over, but she's got a foolproof way to get out of any ticket. She lies and she cries. So then she starts crying and she goes, I can't have a baby. So this is a messed up lie. Funny, but I can also understand why the cop would not want to have anything to do with this. So she's right in that she gets out of it. But I do want to say, I think if this was like the super cop type, and you know the person I'm talking about here, you know the cop that puffs out his chest and looks like he hasn't told a joke or heard a joke in his entire life, that type of cop is not letting you off with a warning. But lucky for Mindy, this cop does. And on top of that, she wants a reward for getting out of it. So they stay in the same spot that they got pulled over, and bang! And this is all before the opening theme even happens. But after the theme is over, we're going to be introduced to the B story, which is that Peter is going to a beer pong tournament and needs a partner because his partner rudely is not going because his dad died. Now, Mindy offers to go, but Peter's like, no chicks allowed. And then goes on to say that Shonda Rhimes won the last tournament. And when Mindy's like, well, what the hell? You know, you said chicks aren't allowed. And he's like, well, Shonda's okay because she's successful like a man, which is messed up, but I enjoyed it. But what's interesting about this is that this whole conversation for the B story is actually going to lead us to the A story. So what's the A story? You see, as they're all standing there talking to each other, all three of them get texts from Jeremy being like, where are you guys? Because they're supposed to be at the event, I guess, or whatever, where the new hospital director, Dr. Jean Fishman, is introducing herself to everybody. So we cut over to that, and she's talking about how she runs a tight ship. And of course, that is when Danny, Mindy, and Peter come in, and apparently they're 16 minutes late. And this is sort of the typical stuff you'd expect from this situation, but it's still funny as we get Morgan saying what practice they're from right after Fishman says, you're lucky I don't know what practice you're from. And then right after that, Mindy's phone starts going off and we get the Iggy Azalea song, I'm so fancy. Yeah, you already know. I mean, it's just fun stuff, but the fun stuff is going to end up with Shulman Associates. They're going to end up getting the graveyard shift because they pissed off Dr. Jean Fishman. Now, to this point, I get that means maybe they can't schedule like C-sections or whatever at opportune times because of it, but they keep talking about having late night deliveries as if having a graveyard shift at the hospital has anything to do with when deliveries happen. Either way, they know they need to fix this and everyone is blaming Mindy. Morgan suggests apologizing and promising to do better in the future, which I thought was a good idea. But the idea they go with is Mindy's, and Mindy's idea is that she's going to take Dr. Jean Fishman out on the town and bond with her. And then the Iggy Azalea song goes off again, and they're like, Mindy, have you learned nothing? And of course, it's Morgan. He's like, sorry, that's mine. So we see Mindy head to Dr. Fishman's office, and she just sort of walks in, even though Dr. Fishman is like, I didn't say come in. But Mindy's like, hey, we're just a couple of women who are trying to make it in a female-dominated industry. And she somehow convinces her to let Mindy take her out on the town. So now that plot line's all set, we're gonna head back over to the B story and see what's going on. So we cut to Peter teaching Morgan how to play beer pong, and they're doing it by throwing lemons into a bucket. Of course, Morgan tries it and he throws the lemon over the bucket and then out the window. Now, I couldn't help but notice that Jeremy's been in the room this whole time as well, watching things happen. So I expected that he would pipe up and ask Peter if he could be his partner. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened, as it turns out he's a beer pong savant. And he says to Peter, we used to be such chums. And Peter's like, yeah, we did used to share an office toothbrush. And Jeremy's like, we did? And then Beverly answers and says, yeah, we all did. And then Peter goes, we did? Now we're going to be cutting back and forth between the A and B stories throughout the episode. And right now we're headed back to the A story. And we're seeing the end of the outing that Mindy and Fishman went on. And then Fishman ends up going in for a kiss on Mindy, who lets it happen. The next day, everyone's all elated because their schedule's gotten better. They're off the graveyard shift. And Mindy's like, that's great, I'm gay now. And of course, everyone's like, what are you talking about? Except Beverly, who's like, of course he's gay. He's dating Dr. C, which is just such a great joke. Beverly's aloofness is just fantastic. But yeah, basically everybody's like, hey, look, you had a gay experience. We've all had gay experiences. But when Mindy's phone rings, we hear the ringtone that she's given to Dr. Jean Fishman, and it's When I Think About You, I Touch Myself, which is just a wild choice. But Mindy's gonna try to shut Jean down here because that's what Danny's saying, although everybody else is like, yeah, you should just do another date with her. But somehow she does end up on the date. After she effectively turns down Jean, she ends up with Jean agreeing to come to her place, drink some wine, and curl up by the fire. Well, that's the cliffhanger we leave that part on, so let's go back to the B story. And Jeremy and Peter have headed up to Dartmouth, with Peter giving Jeremy the nickname Barf. And this is also where we find out that Peter's nickname is Lefty. And according to Peter, it's because he sprained his wrist while yanking it. We're gonna meet a whole bunch of Dartmouth alums, including a callback to previous episodes from the CEOs of Sploders.com, which was a fun callback. But after meeting these Dartmouth alums, we're gonna head straight back to the A story so that we can see Danny telling Mindy that she has to come clean, but it's a short snippet. We go right back to the B story again, where we see Jeremy and Peter in the middle of the beer pong tournament, and they're beating Shonda Rhimes, who's actually there. And Shonda ends up saying she only writes as a way to pay the bills. Her real passion is beer pong. And I bet that's probably true. So we head right back over to the A story where Mindy is trying to come clean to Dr. Fishman. But she starts out by rhapsodizing about the amazing kiss that they had and how she thought about it in the tub after. And maybe not the best way to start off when you're trying to break things off. And then we find out the things that they did on their outing, and she's like, I could see how the couple's nude massage, or the fact that I asked you to check my boobs to see if they're symmetrical, might have sent the wrong message. I mean, at this point, I'm starting to wonder, should she leave Danny? But she concludes by saying she shouldn't have let her kiss her. And of course, Fishman's wife just happens to be right there and is like, you kissed her? To which Danny replies, excuse me, sir, we're in the middle of something here. Either way, the wife starts yelling at Fishman and says, I can't believe you've been keeping this little butch and her girlfriend on the side, which cracked me up because the little butch was Mindy and the girlfriend was Danny. Mindy, now trying to help, says, hey, look, if Jean had mentioned you just once in the 5-hour date that we had, I wouldn't have let her kiss me. Of course, Deb, Jean's wife, storms off when she hears that. Dr. Fishman's like, you're definitely getting the graveyard shift now. So we head back to Jeremy and Peter, and Jeremy is asking Peter to burp him, but Peter's sulking. And Jeremy's like, is this because of the Lefty thing? It's just a nickname, like when my father calls me not mine. Who knows what it means? And this is when we find out the true meaning of the Lefty nickname. Apparently it's because everyone he loves ends up leaving him, and usually to be with one of his friends. Sound familiar? So that's a pretty fucked up nickname then. Obviously Jeremy feels bad, but he's like, stop the pity party. Let's have a Peter party. And like Peter, I also enjoy alliteration. They're gonna go back out to the tournament and win the whole damn thing. But before we get to see the aftermath of the epic win, we've got to wrap up the love rectangle on the A story. Mindy just can't stop herself from continuing to lie. She wants to make her situation with Danny equate to Jean's with Deb. Jean's the only one who did anything wrong here. I'm just gonna say it. She's the one who kissed a woman while she was married. I'm not really sure why this has to fall on Mindy, but Mindy does keep escalating it, eventually saying that Danny is suicidal. For some reason, Jean and Deb believe this, and they say, we're coming over. Of course, Danny's like, why would you say that? He refuses to go along with the lie, and he tells her, you need to come clean. But when Deb and Jean actually show up and Mindy starts trying to come clean, he realizes how badly it's going for her, and he comes out and he plays the part acting suicide. Now, he starts out strong, but he begins to waver pretty quickly as he unsuccessfully tries to understand Mindy's miming. Now, he gets it at first, but as soon as she starts miming suicidal things, he doesn't get it. This is the Statue of Liberty. I can't even remember what he said. Oh yeah, cufflinks for this one. I mean, what? But he kind of goes off the deep end. He's like, I let Mindy take my virginity. And when Mindy's like, Danny, it was just a kiss, nothing to throw away a relationship over, he has a bottle of wine in his hand and he throws wine all over her. And then eventually we get a callback as he yells out, I can't have a baby. And right after that great callback, we go straight back to the B story. Jeremy and Peter are accepting their accolades as Jeremy in that moment decides he's going to take a stand against the Lefty nickname. He gets everyone to agree that, Lefty's the champion, right? Peter's the champion. He should get to pick his own nickname. And put on the spot, Peter can't think of anything except diarrhea. So now his nickname goes from Lefty to diarrhea, which is not the best. So we've wrapped the B story, but we still got a couple beats left for the A. Jean, Danny, and Deb are sitting on the couch together, and Deb's saying to Danny, forgiveness is important. She's going to forgive Jean. He should be able to forgive Mindy. And Danny finally agrees to this, but he says it's on certain conditions. First, Mindy needs to help him build his Adirondack chairs. Second, she needs to cook dinner for him once a month. And last, she needs to wake him up every once in a while with a, which I'm assuming means head. Mindy reluctantly agrees and eventually gets Deb and Jean out. But that's how the episode ended. We had a lot of laughs in here, but let's see how it ranked.
A rank.
So the rank is where I rank the episode based on 5 categories: story, acting, dialogue, episode coherence, and character relatability. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. And then I have a laugh counter where I tally up the amount of times the episode made me laugh out loud. 1 point per laugh out loud gets added to the score. But before I dive into the rankings here, I just want to say, if you're enjoying this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help me out. But without further ado, the first category is story. And the story is that Mindy and the gang have a new hospital director, and then silliness ensues. It's not really much of a story as it is just sort of following the characters around. Interestingly, the B story actually had a really clear arc. So since the B story was a little bit better story-wise, structure-wise, I gave it a 3. So that brings us to acting. And I thought the acting was really good as usual. I actually felt like Chris Messina's acting in this was a little off. I mean, it's not crazy or anything. It's still going to get a high score. It's just, that was the only thing that kind of brought me down from a 5. Everybody else was really good. So I gave it a 4.25. So that brings us to dialogue. And this episode was absolutely hilarious. The only point of contention I had here was slight. There were a couple of jokes here that were about misgendering, which absolutely made me laugh, but may have furthered stereotypes and could have made people feel a certain way. Again, I'm not saying it wasn't funny, just that maybe it could have been insensitive. So I dropped it from a 5 to a 4.85. It's still basically perfect for me. I just want to leave that little bit of wiggle room. So let's go to episode coherence. I didn't really understand the whole graveyard shift thing because it doesn't really matter for deliveries. I guess for scheduling C-sections it would matter, but also the A story sort of felt like it was all over the place. Like we were just sort of following people around. There wasn't really that much coherence. Anyway, I gave it a 3.25. So that brings us to character relatability. This is probably not a super relatable episode for me personally. Like, I'm not a good liar. Even when I'm trying to prank my spouse or something, I always give it away because I just start getting this goofy smile on my face. So I can't imagine getting myself into such a predicament. Also, I'm not a drinker and I think beer pong's kind of dumb because I had roommates that would play it at 5 in the morning when I was trying to sleep after having worked till 3 a.m. That being said, I do think the beer pong thing was more relatable than the cascading lying was, but I don't think they're entirely unrelatable either. I would think that Danny would have been more upset with her kissing someone else, Also, Dr. Fisherman doesn't seem to take any accountability at all. All in all, it's pretty relatable. I gave it a 3.5. So that brings us to the laugh counter, and we've had some decent ratings, not super high, but a good laugh counter will put it into the top tiers. And I had a really high laugh counter here. It got me 29 times, which puts the grand total up to a 47.85, putting this episode into the meaning of life. As for the series average, it goes to a 36.9, giving it another jump further into the Holy Grail. And if you're ranking along with me, can you drop your score in the comments? I am really curious if I'm nuts for having 29 laughs in this. But thanks for listening and/or watching. Check out the other Mindy Project episodes, or any of my other movie or sitcom ranking episodes. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like. You can email me at john@therankpodcast.com. You can also become a patron at patreon.com/therankpodcast. But I'll leave you with this. Why does Mindy brace herself every time Danny complains now?
Well, why is that?
Because now she always gets nervous whenever Danny starts to whine.
Move this man!
All right, so the 5th episode of the 13th.
Cut!
As my cats are going nuts in the background.